So this is our Ecocentric Ocean Law panel. We're talking about protection of marine wildlife as one example that we'll hear about, and other marine resources like coral reefs. And then, of course, the marine environment is very much a focus of human interest, consumptive and non-consumptive interests. And so we certainly want to have a component where the balancing of human interests in the marine environment and how an ecocentric approach to ocean protection would try to strike that balance between rights for the marine environment itself and rights of human communities that depend on it.
Essentially, ocean rights is rights of nature in the context of ocean law and policy. The ocean produces oxygen for every other breath we breathe, absorbs 25% of carbon emissions, directly related to maintaining the climate system. So the fulfillment of human rights are dependent upon having a healthy ocean. And I'd really like to get into some examples. So first, at the national level, Earth Law Center, in collaboration with the Leatherback Project, provided legal input to the government of Panama, and they, in 2022, passed a national law recognizing the rights of nature. And then subsequently, following that recognition, Panama passed a law that recognizes the rights of sea turtles. And there's been really interesting case studies that, have emerged even since then. For example, the Loyalty Islands province recognized legal personhood of sharks and sea turtles. And then another case I'll mention, Ecuador recognizes the rights of nature constitutionally. So the Galapagos, being one of the world's largest marine protected areas, utilizes rights of nature as a guiding principle for management. And industrial fishing and harming of sharks is completely prohibited. In 2017, 20 crew members were actually prosecuted and fined over $6 million for having over 6,000 dead sharks aboard a ship. And here the court not only ruled in favor of nature of sharks, but also ruled that nature is entitled to reparations. A question that comes to mind is what happens when those sharks or sea turtles in Panama leave their waters. They're, largely maybe unprotected. While we have global commitments like 30 by 30, our governance is still highly siloed. And we also have transboundary issues facing the ocean, like plastic pollution, mining, and fishing, but they're all regulated separately. One specific campaign on the international level I'd love to tell you about is the vision of adopting a universal declaration of ocean rights by 2030 at the United Nations level. And generally, these types of declarations would be legally non-binding. So, for example, the Universal Declaration on Human Rights is legally non-binding, but led to the development of so many laws and policies that, from local to national levels and to more international law following that.
I'm going to tell you a story about the Republic of Palau and how, while I was working there for their government, they decided to consider giving coral reefs rights. Palau is a small island developing state, or large ocean state, as a lot of people in Palau like to refer to it. When you go to visit Palau, and you go to the customs person and you hand over your passport, they stamp it with a stamp that actually writes out a pledge, which then you sign. Essentially, you saying you're going to tread lightly while you're there. You're going to try to protect the environment, and you're going to respect the people. It's like impossible to overstate the importance of coral reefs to a country like Palau, not only in terms of food security, right? Most of the protein in the country came from the coral reefs, came from reef fish, but also just it's why people came to visit the country, right? So it's basically the foundation of the economy as well. And there was a delegate who was looking at our options for protecting coral reefs through legislation. So I worked with the lawyers at the House of Delegates there to put something together. How many rights to give the reefs? That was definitely a discussion that we had. We also noted that this was not about stifling development, right? That would not be the intent of this law. The intent of the law would be to protect this resource for future generations. We also established a board of directors considering any kind of significant governmental action, making recommendations as necessary to amend that or providing alternatives. If there were violations, the board would need to take action. The Ministry of Justice could get involved if it escalated and needed to get to that point. It's kind of a funny case study because they didn't go with it, right? But I'll finish by explaining a few of the a little bit of the feedback that we got, right? Being the first country to do something like this, there was some concern expressed about, might we make mistakes, right? We're not sure that we want to be the ones experimenting. And maybe this is me reading into it a little bit, but I think there was a little bit of hesitancy regarding the way that it would be perceived internationally as well as domestically. And I think part of that was also related to a final bit of feedback which we got, which was that Palau is governed by an indigenous population, right? So that may go counter to what some might assume. In this case, they didn't feel that giving rights to reefs was something that really connected to their culture, right? That wasn't the way that they saw it. But in the end, they decided to consider other approaches. And to my knowledge, they haven't actually done anything yet. So we'll see.
So we take from the ocean what we need, whether that's useful natural resources, and on a bigger scale, the use of the ocean to filter our water and our needs. The ocean is such, like Rachel said, it's 70% of the world, and we need to be able to start taking a step forward to protect it more, because only smaller portions of it are actually regulated by states, and then the larger portion, the high seas areas, is not. And so without that regulation and without that ability to work collaboratively globally, there's going to be a lot of offset. And so moving forward to human rights in the environment, historically, with the regulations that we do have in place, Indigenous people and local communities have been excluded from ocean governance entirely. And this is the same type of thing that's happening inland as well as ocean. So that's something that we need to strongly consider when we push ocean rights forward. We also need to acknowledge that Indigenous people have lived in nature's space, and they preserve and conserve the ocean, and the ocean continues to look after them in return. The U.S. federal statutes, such as the Marine Mammal Protection Act, create roadblocks for Indigenous people and local communities and coastal communities, which rely on natural resources that our current statutes are protecting. And Indigenous people's values and understandings are important for decision makers to engage with and recognize and respect.